Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Addiction, Alcoholism, and the Three Principles. I'm gregsuchy, and I'm back today with Harry Durbitsky. And we've decided today we're actually going to discuss the recent audio release from Sydney Banks about thought and alcoholism. Because obviously that's exactly what we're dealing with on on the series here. So we wanted to open this up as a group discussion. I know Harry has something to say before we get started. So here's Harry.
Yeah, this talk by Sid is, for me, was interesting. Sid gave about an hour and a half talk on Salt Spring with maybe 100 people or 200 people, not 200, but 100 people. And I can't remember if this talk was a splice of that or was just a separate talk that he did in his living room. But one of the things that I noticed, guys, was that this talk is pre-three principles. So, and he's primarily talking about the principle of thought and wisdom associated with that. But it also, to me, was a teaching ground for the psychologists of what he wanted them to center around at the early stages of the development of what he was teaching to the psychologists. Because what I did notice was that it didn't really have a strong spiritual message. It had a very strong spiritual thought message. And I found that to be interesting for me to experience. So I'm just going to read from what I put down. Did you look at the website that I put, where I put the text, Greg?
Yeah, I did. I took a look at that. Looks good. The biggest, one of the biggest keys to me in that message from him is the fact that we can change our thoughts through practice, through choosing which thoughts that we give energy to, which ones we entertain. We are training ourselves to create a thought pattern. And he talks about stories and the stories we create about ourselves, and we just have to believe them because we made them up, right? They must be true.
Well, that was one of the interesting observations I had, James, about what Greg said. I've been listening, obviously, to Greg for 2.5 years, and Greg primarily had a spiritual insight, and then expressed his wisdom from this spiritual insight, and then the three principles kind of broadened out. But he didn't really change what he saw, and he very much described it very similarly to what Sid was talking about on this particular tape. And that, I found that ironical, Greg, to be honest, how similar the two of you were sounding in terms of that. So obviously at the core, James, is this cornerstone about thought and changing thought, right at the core of the healing. And that was very heavily emphasized on this particular talk. The other thing, before we move on, I read what I wrote, and then I listened to the talk. You cannot put Sydney Banks in a can. What I wrote, which was the best of what I could, didn't have anywhere near the juice, even though they're taking the words of Sydney Banks. It didn't have the juice of the talk. Did you understand what I mean?
Right.
It was different. And what I wrote was flatter, and it wasn't that it came from me. You cannot put a can around Sydney Banks. It's just that it's not that type of observation, like what you were talking, James. So I'm just going to read one quick thing. When they discover something better than the alcohol, this is where the secret lies, because they change their thought. So maybe we could get the other two guys to put just a few words in. Which one of you want to go first?
I can go. I just think, I was listening to what he was saying, and I think that, the most interesting part about it is how easily the old pattern of thought can slip away once one thing is recognized. As far as my pattern of thought goes, it's like I'm making something a reality and a truth for me that isn't a reality and a truth. And once I recognize it, it's amazing how quickly it slips away. I think that's the most, it's amazing.
It's what? Sorry?
Amazing.
Oh, amazing. Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
It shows the fluidity, and that thought is just energy, and you can't hold on to it. It's the holding on to it that brings the personal beliefs into the picture. And even it's like being attached to a good feeling. Even that is a belief. You're holding on to it. So you cannot, wisdom is a weird thing. You do not own it. It's just there. You can access it, but you don't own it. So if, say, you're the highest level of consciousness in the world, you still, very shortly, someone will go like this. You can't. So we with our thought, to see the falseness, which was Sid really emphasized, is powerful, really powerful, freeing for sure. But to try and hold on to a good feeling is just as much BS as the other. You can't hold on to it. In fact, the more you give it away, the more you share it, either with other people or with yourself, the more comes back. And once you see how it works, you see, that's what Sid's emphasizing with the principles. You have to see how it works. Once you see how it works, then you don't fight it. But when you think you're supposed to hold on to a good feeling because it feels so good, guess what? You're stuck in your thinking. And what Greg is talking about in terms of training or whatever, he doesn't mean mentally that stuff. Yeah, I think I'm correct for that, right, Greg?
Right. No, it's about going with the flow of things. And we absolutely can hold on to thoughts and feelings. But it's just like taking water out of a river. It becomes stagnant and it becomes old and it becomes kind of useless after a while. It's when we're part of that flow, the constant movement of energy, that we can actually benefit from it and gain from that energy. And all that we're ever really talking about in the series is a simple misunderstanding of where our experience of life actually comes from. And it's, we've already been talking about it a little bit today with our stories that we create about ourselves. Well, I prefer this, I dislike that, I'm this kind of person, I grew up in this kind of family, so that means I have to be this kind of person or whatever. We all have some kind of story going on, and that fact never changes. The story changes. But we're always living through our thinking. So we always have some kind of story. And today my story is a whole lot better than it was a couple of years ago, and but who knows, I may wake up tomorrow and I've got a storm cloud in my head. And that's okay. Just go with the flow of that and realize that it's passing. None of it is permanent.
And the only thing important, James, is the space, the feeling you have inside yourself, rather than the holding on of understanding what's happening. See, trying to understand what's happening is impossible. It's like me trying to put Sid in a can. I tried. I didn't do it I didn't try to put him in a can, but I wanted to put something that people could relate to, in our discussion. But it's impossible. It's like he had an image, a shark in a bathtub, trying to contain a shark in a bathtub isn't very, and that's truth. The wisdom is it just explodes in different directions. And the other thing that I have seen is what we are concentrating on, what we want to achieve. That's just our way. That's the way of spirit distracting us so we could do all the work over here and here. Because if you're going to interfere with it, You can't do it. Spirit cannot change you until you get out of the way. Because if you have beliefs or stories that you're telling yourself and you're believing in those stories, it can't penetrate. And then you see the falseness, and all of a sudden, you let go. And once you let go, you're beautiful. But then you still have a belief that you want to hold on to that, like the one you brought up. And that's putting it back together again. This. You cannot control your life. You're taught that you're Superman, but in actual fact, you're super little boy. Or whatever, type of thing. Gavin, do you have anything to say? It would be cool, honestly.
At the moment, I watched the video, but I didn't like the sound much, so I was intending to go and rewatch it, but I haven't had the chance yet.
Okay. Well, maybe with the talk, it will key a few things. It's a very practical, I would call it practical talk.
Yeah, that's the word I remembered was thought.
Yeah. He did mention it a few times. I will agree with you in that context.
So when I was talking about changing the habits and thought patterns, it really is not a like you were alluding to, Harry. It has nothing to do with really effort. It's what it really is that every possibility exists in every moment. It's just that we're only capable of seeing the possibilities that we've trained ourselves to see. It's really just a matter of like you said, with the letting go. It's letting go of what we believe to be true and seeing what else is out there. It's like we've got access to this library with an infinite number of books in it. And at some point, we went in and got one book and said, this is it. This is my book. This is the truth. And we carry it around with us. And it's getting kind of old and tattered, and it doesn't really always apply, but we're like, this is my book. And all we have to do is simply put it back on the shelf and look right next to it. There's another book. There's trillions of them. There's all these infinite possibilities that exist in every single moment for each one of us. And all that we're doing with things like the law of attraction and stuff like that, you're not manifesting it. It's already there. You're noticing what's already there. When people do a vision board, all it's doing is helping to focus your thinking.
Yeah.
You're recentering your thinking on what you want to think about. It's not the board that's working. It's just the fact that you're choosing what direction you want your thoughts to go in. And that is
Like a reminder.
Yeah, it's a quick reminder. Hey, come back over here. Yeah, there's this shiny object over there that's going to call you away. It's your old stories, your old habits, your old problems, your old addictions, all that stuff. It's going to keep calling to you for a while. But all you have to do is remember, no, that's not the direction I'm heading in anymore. I'm heading in this direction. Whatever that looks like for you. It could be going back to school and getting training for a better career. It could be whatever. Just having that focus and keeping sight of that when we lose sight of it. It's not that it's gone. We just look somewhere else. There's a squirrel running by somewhere. Oh, look at the squirrel. And you forget about, what you were actually looking toward. So it's just a gentle reminder to look back in the direction you actually want to be in. And it hit me this summer with I did a lot of kayaking, and one of my first trips out, this group of guys that I went with, they're all, they're like safety and rescue certified and all that, and they're trying to teach me, things to do and what not to do. And one of the big things that stuck with me is that you never look at where you don't want to go, because that's where you're going to go. If you're looking at that rock on the river, you're going to hit that rock. But if you're looking in between the rocks and you're paddling in that direction, that's where you're going to go. Where you put your attention, where you put your focus and your energy, is where things will start to just appear in front of you to show you the way. So if we're putting our energy and focus into not getting high today, not getting drunk today, that's not really putting it in a great place. Rather put it in a direction. Instead of saying, I'm not going to get messed up today, say, I'm going to accomplish this one thing today. Or I'm at least going to work toward it. Even if I make half a step in that direction, it's still a million times better than sitting there and just saying, I'm not going to get messed up today. I'm not going to get messed up today. And so many of us know where that ends up leading. Next thing you know, you're messed up. Just like I'm not going to hit that rock on the river. Next thing I know, I'm hitting that rock and I'm flipping over and I'm getting wet.
So you see the power of changing thought. That's the three principles. That's the essence of the three principles. You just change thought. But you can't do it mentally. That's not what Greg's talking about. It's not a mental effort. One of the things my daughter asked me yesterday was, she listened to our first talk on the podcast that we did, and this lady says it's very difficult, it's hard, and we said no, it's easy, and I had to talk to her for quite a while for her to understand what we were talking about. We're actually talking about something that's far easier than mental effort. The mental effort is the negativity or the wrong use of the principles of thought. That's not what Sid is pointing towards. He's pointing more to what Greg was describing. And if since we can't control thought, we can use thought in a healthy, wise direction. And that turns out, the more that we see how that works, see, that's the key, James. Once you see how it works, you naturally, it's like a hammer. If you first you're given a hammer and a nail and you say you use the other end, well, it's not going to work too well. And then you put your finger on top of the nail and you hit it and go, wow, that hurt. You start to learn how to just how it works. Everything. When I first did podcasts, it was so complicated, James. And I had to peel the puzzle and all this stuff. But once I saw how it all worked together, then I could be creative with it. But before that, all I was confused. Well, how do you do this? How do you do that? And that's what psychology is. How do you do this? How do you do that? But what Greg's talking about is actually a very easy way. And the more after he had his experience, he went to the easy way. He tried the hard way too, by the way, a couple of times, and he found, guess what? It was pretty hard.
Yeah.
Yeah. So he did. So you see, we're not like enlightened, or we're not still a human being. You're still James, right? You even though you're spiritual, you've had a spiritual insight, you're still just James, and you have all this stuff in there, and it comes out. And if your insight is deep enough, you just let it go. If it isn't, you do what Greg says. You fall down, you get on the horse right away and forget about it. That's what Greg always says. He says, relapse is no big deal. Unless James makes it a big deal.
Yeah. What I found is, me and Greg met last year at this time, around this time, at a sweat lodge, which, there's a backstory behind it. But I definitely found that the process that I've gone through in this last year and the things that have happened that I accepted as truth and I made it my reality, in turn, the things that have happened since then, it's been organic. It's been a natural process of letting go. And sometimes it looked really messy, but it has been a beautiful process because it's been flawless, leading me up to this point where I can wake up in the morning and say, hey, that's not my truth anymore. And I'm free. And most of the people around me are suffering because they're accepting certain things as the ultimate truth and seeing them as simply not changes things for me, changes everything. So it's been organic, that's for sure.
Beautiful.
But here's the crazy part about it. It takes the same amount of effort to swing that hammer, whether you're hitting a nail or you're hitting your finger. One produces results you want, and one produces results you don't. It's the same effort. So it's not harder. It's just different at first because we're so used to the other way. And we have plenty of people to remind us of the other way. You know, I'm not against people having a vision board. You want to know, I changed all the pictures, like the background pictures on my phone, to the truck that I wanted when I knew I was going to need a new vehicle. And guess what? I got that truck. Not because I had the picture on there, but because I kept focusing so that every time I'd go on my phone to maybe purchase something online, I'd see that truck and I'd go, you know what? Maybe I don't need this other thing. I need the money for this truck. It's just simple redirection. I decided to hit the nail instead of my finger with the hammer. It's the same effort to swing the hammer. It's the same effort for me to paddle my kayak down the river, whether it be into a rock or in between the rocks. That space between the rocks exists even when I'm hung up on the rock. It still exists right next to me. I could have fun, safe passage if I simply redirected my attention. And that's all this is really about. It is simple. I don't necessarily want to say it's easy at first, but it becomes quite easy. It really does.
What it really is, James, is it's very easy, and then certain times just to teach you that it isn't so like you don't have it all together. You get tested, and the times you get tested the most with drugs and alcohol are those quiet times, those peaceful times. And those are the times when you understand what Greg's pointing toward, you enjoy and use that to empty out. But what people do is they fill that time up. You don't want to do that. You want to get in. You did a native sweat. Native wisdom points to, can you enjoy your own company? That's wisdom. That's the wisdom. Once you start to enjoy your thoughts, enjoy who you are, you've got it. Because then the quiet times aren't, oh, I feel uncomfortable. Got to head to the fridge. I got to get a video game. I got to, whatever. So it's the silence that becomes the frustrating part. You obviously can do well when you feel good, but can you do well when you're silent, quiet, nothing happening around you? And those are the most precious times, because that's when you empty. You see, the mind has an unusual feature to it. You have to empty it. It doesn't make sense. You have to leave room for the new. But if you bring the old with it, it has no room for the new. And I have started to really hone in on that, because that was a bad habit. When it got too quiet, too idle, I had trouble with me. It was easier when I had something to share with people, to do. But when I was just with me, that turned out to be the most precious. Because I actually had to, I hate this word, but I actually had to learn a little discipline. I hate that word. I hate it because I don't believe in it. But in a way, I had to use Greg's phrase, train my thoughts not to. And all it required was for me to see where the beautiful feelings lay. That's all. Once I found where the beautiful feelings lay, the peace and quiet. So who was running away from that, James? With my thinking. See, our thinking takes us to happiness and away. We can do
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So like the concept that it's not attaching truth to either or, because neither of them have one more significance than the other. Is that what you're saying?
more or less. Yeah. You're talking about neutrality of thought. And that's that.
Yeah, like as far as like when you say, you know, discipline and, you know, you say you hate it, and that would be like as far as understanding that there is, you know, I was going to say this when Greg was talking earlier, like understanding, it's like Dr. Amy Johnson said, the sun behind the cloudy sky, the storm, you know, it's always there, whether it's sunny out or it's storming. It's always there. Yeah.
And this the space of going home, or whatever way you want to describe it, is always the answer. Always, 100%. So Greg, Harry, Gavin, we all go through stuff, but if you head in the right direction, what happens is you arrive quite quickly back home, and it feels so good. So you see the falseness of the other. That's what Sid was alluding to. You see the falseness of the other, this personal truth, this personal beliefs, this personal thinking, and you see the falseness of it, and then it frees you to step into the silence. And the moment you can accept the silence, your level of consciousness goes up. And when your level of consciousness goes up, the old bad habits get weaker. You're not indulging in them as much. You're not, you know, the only problem with drugs and alcohol is there's a lot of thought associated with it. Because thought creates feeling. And so thought is associated with the drinking. And people are concentrating on the ego to solve the problem of drugs and alcohol. They're missing out on their beauty.
Plug my phone in, sorry.
And I want to read something here. If we can see that past experiences are just thought now, it will take all the falseness away. We cannot start again until we find new thoughts, which will create a new reality and show alcohol and drugs for what it is, and that is nothing. Now that is really a mouthful.
Yeah, and one thing that really hit me a few years back was when I found contentment in contentment, where I found the true happiness in life is in the everyday moments, not just in the real ecstatic ones like riding a roller coaster, going to an amusement park or whatever, you know, falling in love or that kind of stuff, but like the everyday moments. And you know, you hear a lot of stories about Sid. Every cup of tea he ever had was the greatest cup ever. This was the most delicious cup of tea I've ever had. Is that always true? Well, yeah, if you aren't getting too caught up on particulars. Is it a good cup of tea? Yeah, enjoy it. It doesn't have to be literally the best cup of tea in the world to be the best cup of tea. It's the best because it's what you have right there and you're enjoying it. You know, yeah, I could have, you know, nicer things, a nicer house, you know, more land, whatever, but I really enjoy what I have right now for now, you know. It's that kind of thing. We get too caught up in chasing the happiness. And in my experience, when you're chasing the happiness, it inevitably has to balance itself out, and you end up with the low times too, which is fine. That's part of the experience. But it's in that kind of like middle ground in between those, to me, where true peace and contentment lies.
And the low moods and so on, or the low feelings, they disappear too. It's really strange, but because you're not attached to the highs and lows or the judgment calls in your own mind, they also disappear. You notice that it's a different type of experience, but you enjoy it because it's teaching you something very, very important. So can you imagine if we are experiencing life without any judgment of it, whatever way we're going, we're just going to keep learning. We're going to learn about beautiful feelings, and we're going to learn about false feelings. Very both necessary in the process. I like seeing my own bullshit, and heaven knows there's enough in there to examine, but I don't want to label myself as a big poor me because I'm not invincible, or I'm not always wise, or don't have these things. That's the human condition. We have to accept the fact that we're vulnerable, that we're not always on top. We don't always do it perfect. But how we view the experience, that was what Sid was talking about, is the key. So if say you were all of a sudden had cancer right now, of course you would feel that. Oh my God, I might die. But how you view it for the rest of your life is up to you. You could get really bummed out on it, like many people will, or you can use it as a pivot to realize how precious every moment is that you're alive right now. And that's the gift, James. You are alive right now. That's the more you're conscious of that, the more alive that feeling is in you, the less power the outside has. Doesn't matter about alcohol and drugs. That's just a symptom of the outside. Could be sex. It could be, who knows?
Yeah, one of many.
Sorry?
I said, yeah, it could be one of many.
Yeah. So, but that's not what you're concentrating on. The falseness is actually a signal to you that you're hitting your hand with a hammer rather than the nail. That's all. It's not even, but if you're taught that's bad, then you're going to experience that maybe for a week, some people for a lifetime. For a lifetime. Can you imagine? A lifetime. And the only thing that can break that is an insight. The baloney blows up. So Greg is full of baloney.
Yeah, at least now sometimes it's all beef bologna.
But so we want to. So this is what Sid said. The key to understanding it is how we view the experience via thought that is important. So that's what he feels is the key to understanding. We create an excuse to drink, which creates a big poor me. That's the way he used to call ego. Poor me or dig me. Poor me. That is thought. It's only thought. Past experiences are the problem, so we have to forget them and start anew. And this changes is thought. So it's thought, 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 thought. But it's not ego thought, not personal thought, impersonal thought, spiritual thought, neutral thought. It's funny. You have to let go of who you think you are to find out who you are. And I guess the truth, what Greg found when that moment, he saw clearly the falseness of what he had been believing. clearly the falseness. And
Yeah.
we all, I know that to be true because, of course, I have my own experience of falseness. When I walked into the silence for 3 or 4 minutes on Salt Spring Island, my whole world changed. The whole world changed because everything I had believing up to that point was false. You know, and I felt, oh. And then when I got into trouble, which I did, because I didn't understand as clearly as Greg did about thought, I knew about spirit. That was what I was really clear on, what I had really experienced. I didn't understand about thought. So I was still a loose cannon out there, floating around. And no matter how lost I got, James, and I got lost big time, not like the drugs and alcohol, but still lost. The light of the spirit shone through and would not keep a good man down like you. It will not keep you down no matter what you're experiencing. The spirit is too strong in you. It will always guide you to the light. And as fast as you go is, you can't go any faster. You can't go any faster than what you're going.
Well, and I think that a lot of suffering also comes from the idea that it has to be fast, or the idea that it has to be difficult. And Greg put it, that was put extremely well, by the way, Greg, as far as focusing on the clear path and a kayak. It's right there. It's been right there the whole time. But what Sydney Banks, I feel like what he was referring to as far as like, you know, seeing the falseness in it, once I saw it for what it was and stopped being so attached to what I thought was truth for me, you know, that idea that we have, the story that we develop. And it's like, once I saw the falseness in that, I saw the path. It was like, okay, there is a clear path that I can go down. And it doesn't have to be hard anymore. I don't have to, you know, get lost in something that isn't even real anymore. And in turn, it you know, makes me treat other people differently. I have a different attitude. And then in turn, I develop different thoughts about myself and about the community around me, you know, the people around me. And you know, my experience recently, it's just been perpetuating, you know, like I've been in a really peaceful place, just because I did have a moment where I did see the falseness in what I had created in my mind, this house of cards, that I just looked at it as true, you know, carrying that book around, like Greg said. And yeah, it's been my experience. So that's ironic that was the video or the audio that was good that we'll listen to.
And the next thing that's required is for you to see that for yourself. The hardest thing for any of us to see is your own change. You know, your own good feelings, the way you're expressing, different than when you were before. And I have a client that miracles are happening before her, but she still can't see that she's better off. Like tons of miracles, tons, but she can't see that she's better off. And so of course she has to go a little bit deeper to see that. But over time, she'll suddenly wake up to, oh, it isn't the same anymore, or whatever. So we all get it. Most are piece by piece by piece. But the more you can see your own true change, not false, not sugar-coated, true change, the more powerful the truth will be in you. Guaranteed. Guaranteed. Because obviously the only thing that holds truth back is you and your thoughts. This is so fascinating. This is a pretty interesting session we have here, Greg. This is pretty cool. I'm so glad you came on, James. It's just fantastic. This is really, we don't usually get such a delicious opportunity to share with such a beautiful soul about this subject like this. It's just great. I really
I appreciate it. You know, I'm like a pretty analytical, like I question everything that I learned, but you know, like I said, in the last year, it's been I've pretty much lived I've lived out attachment to both sides of, you know, this. I've lived it out. I've experienced it, and so everything that, you know, Greg kind of pointed towards, Sydney pointed towards, Dr. Amy Johnson pointed towards. These are all things that I had to take an honest look at, and you know, it's been a cool experience. So I just wanted to hop in today and see what you guys are talking about, and listen to the audio. I actually have to jump off. I got to catch lunch.
Okay, well, we're going to wrap it up, but before we can wrap it up pretty much right here, but I just want to read one more thing, James, if you wouldn't mind.
Oh, go ahead.
It's a conclusion. If this is from Sid's talk, if you want change, it must be in a positive way. It cannot be in a negative way, because that will keep the falseness alive. Once you see the falseness of your thought system, it releases wisdom, which heads us into a positive reality. Then we see alcohol for what it is, i.e., it is only a human being giving it the power through lack of consciousness or lack of understanding. And here he finishes his last sentence. We treat the symptoms, but we don't find out why. So the dealing with the symptoms is not the answer. Why? And the why is, in his mind, thought. Pretty simple, except it turns out it's an endless journey of love and understanding.
It is organic.
It's organic. I love that. Greg uses that word too, and it took me a while to appreciate that, but it is a correct word. It is organic.
That it is. Well, it's definitely, it's definitely turned out to be a wonderful discussion. Thanks for joining us, James and Gavin. And look forward to getting together in a couple more weeks and talk about something else too.
Yeah, 2 weeks is Jack Pransky's coming on. So one of his last talks before he retires, theoretically. Yeah.
Well, we never know what we're going to talk about with him, so it'll be interesting.
Yeah.
All right, everybody, enjoy the rest of your day, and we'll see you soon.
Thanks for coming on, guys. Really appreciate it. Very nice.